Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. If you ever see a gas station that says last stop for 70 miles, keep driving. I was about 4 hours into a 6-hour drive when I realized I needed to stop, not just for gas, but because I was falling asleep at the wheel. My eyes kept drifting shut for half a second at a time. That thing where you blink and suddenly you're 50 feet further down the road than you thought you were. I turned up the music and rolled down the window, but the cold air only helped for a few minutes. I needed caffeine. The highway was empty. I hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes. When I saw the glow of a gas station sign up ahead, I felt relieved. It was one of those old independent places, not a chain, the kind that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 80s. A single building with 2 pumps out front and a hand-painted sign that said, last stop for 70 miles. I pulled in and parked at the pump. The lot was empty except for a beat-up truck parked around the side of the building. I figured it belonged to whoever was working the night shift. I got out, stretched my legs, and filled my tank. I paid at the pump and headed inside. I should have just gotten back in my car and left, but I needed that coffee, and I needed to use the bathroom, so I walked inside. The store was small, a few aisles of snacks and car supplies, a coffee station in the back corner with those glass pots that had probably been sitting on the burner for hours, a cooler full of sodas and energy drinks along the back wall. The lights were that harsh fluorescent kind that made everything look slightly off. The attendant was behind the counter. He was maybe 50, with thinning gray hair and a face that looked like it hadn't slept in days. He had the TV on, some late-night infomercial with the sound turned low. He looked up when I walked in, and something in his expression changed. Just for a second, like he was surprised to see me, or worried. Evening, he said. Hey, just grabbing coffee. I walked to the back and poured myself a cup. It was burnt and bitter, but I didn't care. I just needed the caffeine to get me through the next 2 hours. I grabbed a candy bar too and brought everything to the counter. The attendant ran me up slowly. He kept glancing past me toward the windows, toward my car. Driving alone? He asked. Yeah. Long trip? Few more hours. He nodded but didn't say anything else. He was staring at the window again. I turned to look, but there was nothing out there. Just my car at the pump, the empty highway beyond. Something wrong? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he slid a piece of paper across the counter. A napkin. He had written on it in pen. You're being followed. Don't go back to your car. I stared at the napkin. Then I looked back up at him. His face was completely serious. What are you talking about? He held up a hand. Keep your voice down. Look at the monitor. He pointed to a small security screen mounted on the wall behind the counter. It showed a black and white feed of the parking lot. My car was there, and someone was standing next to it. My stomach dropped. The figure was on the passenger side, just standing there facing the store. I couldn't make out any features. They were wearing dark clothes, and their face was in shadow. I spun around and looked out the window. There was no one there, just my car. Empty lot. Nothing. I looked back at the monitor. The figure was still there, standing in the same spot. What the hell? I whispered. It doesn't show up when you look directly, the attendant said. Only on the cameras. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. But I know what happens to people who go out there when it's waiting for them. My heart was pounding. I looked out the window again. Nothing. Back at the monitor. The figure hadn't moved. It was closer to the front of my car now, still facing the store. This is insane, I said. This has to be some kind of trick. I wish it was. He reached under the counter and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed news articles, missing persons reports, headlines about bodies found on the highway. For people in the last 8 months, he said. All of them stopped here late at night. All of them went back to their cars even after I warned them. They found them a few miles down the road. Cars stopped in the middle of the highway. Engines still running. Drivers still in their seats. Eyes open. No marks on them. Coroner said their hearts just stopped. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. I looked at the articles. The photos of the victims. A young woman. A middle-aged man. A couple in their 30s. Real people. Real deaths. Why haven't the police done anything? I asked, done what? There's nothing to investigate. No signs of foul play. No witnesses. Just people dying on a lonely stretch of highway. Happens all the time. They chalk it up to fatigue or medical emergencies. I looked at the monitor again. The figure was even closer now, standing right in front of my car. How long does it stay? I asked. Until sunrise usually. Sometimes longer. But if you stay inside, you're safe. It can't come in here. Why not? He shrugged. I don't know. I stopped asking questions like that months ago. I just know the rules. Stay inside when it's dark. Don't go out to the lot. Wait for daylight. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was crazy. But I couldn't explain the figure on the monitor. I couldn't explain why it wasn't there when I looked with my own eyes. Okay, I said, I'll wait. He looked relieved. Good. Smart. You can sit in the back if you want. There's a couch. I've got some magazines. It's only about 4 hours until sunrise. He walked to the front door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt was loud in the quiet store. Just in case, he said, sometimes people panic and try to run. This way you won't do anything stupid. Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable, but I told myself he was just being cautious. He was trying to help. I sat down on a stool near the counter. The attendant went back to watching his infomercial. Every few minutes, I would look at the monitor. The figure was always there, sometimes in a different position, sometimes closer to the building, but always there. After about an hour, I asked if I could use the bathroom. He pointed to a door near the back of the store. Right through there. I got up and walked toward it. As I passed the counter, I glanced at the security monitor again. Something was different. It took me a second to realize what it was. The timestamp. The footage showed 11:47 p.m., but it was after 3 a.m. now. I had checked my phone when I first came inside. It was definitely past 2. I stopped walking. I looked at the monitor more carefully. The footage wasn't live. It was a loop. The same few minutes playing over and over. My blood went cold. I looked out the window at my car. Really looked this time. There was no one out there. There had never been anyone out there. I kept my voice calm. Hey, what time did that camera say? He didn't answer for a second. When I turned around, he was standing right behind me. You should use the bathroom, he said. His voice was different now. Flatter. You've been holding for a while. The timestamp is wrong, I said. The footage is old. His expression didn't change. He just stared at me with those tired eyes. You saw the articles, he said. You saw what happened to people on this highway. Those could be from anywhere. Anyone could print those out. He took a step toward me. I took a step back. You should stay, he said. It's not safe out there. I looked at the door. Locked. The deadbolt needed a key from this side. Where's the key? I asked. I can't let you leave. Not until morning. For your own safety. I backed up further. My hand found the door handle to the back room. I pushed it open and stepped through. It wasn't a break room. It was a storage space. Dim light from a single bulb. Shelves lined the walls. And on the shelves were boxes. Dozens of them. Each one labeled with a date. I opened the nearest one. Inside was a wallet, a phone with a cracked screen, a set of car keys, a driver's license. The photo showed a young woman, blonde hair, smiling. I recognized her face from the articles. I opened another box, different items, different license. The middle-aged man, He hadn't been warning those people. He had been taking them. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. He was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. They always figured out, he said. But by then it's too late. No cell signal out here. Nearest town is 40 miles. No one to hear you scream. He was holding something, a length of cord. I backed into the shelves. My hand closed around something heavy. A wrench, old and rusted but solid. You don't want to do this, he said. It'll be easier if you just cooperate. He stepped forward. I swung. The wrench connected with the side of his head. He staggered sideways and hit the wall. I didn't wait to see if he went down. I ran past him through the doorway into the main store. The front door was still locked. I grabbed a stool from the counter and swung it at the glass window. It cracked but didn't break. I swung again. Again. I could hear him behind me, getting up, cursing. The third swing went through. I knocked out the remaining glass with the stool and climbed through the window frame. Shards cut my arms and legs, but I didn't care. I dropped onto the pavement outside and ran for my car. My keys were still in my pocket. My phone was still in the cup holder where I left it. I got in and started the engine. In the rear view mirror, I saw him stumbling out through the broken window. I floored it. I drove for an hour without stopping. When I finally pulled over to rest stop, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I'm sitting in my car now, doors locked, engine running. I called 911. They're sending someone to the gas station. They told me to stay where I am and wait for an officer to come take my statement. I keep checking my mirrors. I keep expecting to see headlights behind me. The sun is coming up now. I can see the sky turning gray on the horizon. I should feel relieved, but I don't. Because when I climbed through that window, when I ran to my car and looked back at the store, I saw the security monitor through the broken glass. The figure was still on the screen, standing in the lot. But it wasn't by my car anymore. It was standing exactly where I had been standing when I broke the window. I don't know what he had playing on that monitor. I don't know if it was really a loop or something else entirely. I don't know if he made it all up to scare people into staying, or if there was some truth buried under the lies. All I know is that I'm never driving this highway again. And if you ever see a gas station sign that says, last stop was 70 miles, keep driving. Whatever's waiting there, you don't want to find out. Story 2. My grandfather on death row confesses motives to me, Part 1. In the summer of 1999, when I was around 12 years old, my grandfather was arrested for 4 different counts of murder and sentenced to death before I finished middle school. I was with him when the cuffs went on. We were coming back from a camping trip in the pine woods near his house when red and blue lights shot through the trees and veiled his wrinkled skin. I remember seeing sweat running down his face, and I still think of him when I feel it trickling down my nose. He didn't hesitate or even act surprised as we made it to the back gate of his yard. He only squeezed my hand and told me, "I love you, Sonny," to the shock of the whole neighborhood and everyone in my immediate family. The police had received an anonymous tip of suspicious activity coming from my grandfather's home. It was a steady stream of odd observances from over the years that gave them probable cause. He was seen digging at odd hours of the morning. Strange figures were entering his home in the evening, but never leaving. What I think did him in was the local sheriff. Sheriff Locke always had it out for my grandfather. He was always driving by the house, even on holidays, and he never smiled once at my family or me. Friends at school told me he was some true crime nut and that he was writing a book on a serial killer from the 70s. Through his in-depth studies, he convinced himself that the killer, the headhunter, was my Papa Joe. He was a better detective than I had given him credit for. When he was arrested, I never got to see what they found in his shed or buried in the backyard. Not in person, at least. The cops, having some common decency, tried to spare my eyes from the sight, committing me to the arms of my weeping mother. I remember my father shouting that this was impossible. It had to be a misunderstanding. It had to be Papa was a deacon at our church, and even worked as a magician for birthday parties in the area. There was no way such a sweet man could ever be a killer in disguise. The news report and the photos shown my parents the evening after his apprehension were enough to make them change our last name and flee the state. I figured out the details of what was in that yard over the years of hushed tones and quiet internet searches, reading what he did and how he did it. It was hard for me not to hate my grandfather. For the better part of 10 years, I did my best to keep him out of my mind and ignore any mention of him in family correspondence. We never brought him up at family dinners or holidays. We weren't a reunion family, and there wasn't a large enough group to meet up with in any meaningful way. So life went on as it does. I graduated from college, got a technical degree, and met the love of my life, Lacey. Lacey and I were only dating for 3 months when I popped the question. I know it's an odd thing to do that early into dating someone, but I loved her. It felt right. Hell, it almost felt expected by month 2, and she said yes without hesitation. She apparently already had an online board she'd pinned a ton of wedding ideas to during our freshman year at college. So what was the point in waiting? I was the happiest I'd ever been for the 2 weeks we were engaged before it happened. Lacey was cooking that evening, making something with greens. I can't remember when I got a phone call. Before I could respond, a deadpan voice said, "Collect call from XXXXXXXX Penitentiary. Do you accept the charges?" My heart dropped as I heard that name. I knew what it was before she even finished. He'd found me. I swear I wanted to hang up. I wanted to throw my phone into the wall and disappear all over again, but I couldn't. I felt ridiculous. It had been 10 years, and he was locked behind bars at a state facility. I had power over him. Power to make him disappear from mine and Lacey's life with a clean slate. I'd never be connected to his name or deeds again if I just put down the phone, but I couldn't. "Yes," I said, "I accept." There was a dull buzz and feedback before a light voice crackled to life from the other end of the line. "Sonny," my grandfather said. "You there?" "Yeah," I said. I somehow wanted to be both mute and loudly vulgar at the same time. "Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. How'd you get this number?" I asked, "How'd you find me?" "I don't really have time, Dash." "Make time." He cleared his throat and half-heartedly said, "Your mother." That was enough. "Great." I said, "She's giving out my number." "Just to me, Frank," he said, and after I begged. "Cool. Well, you found me. What do you want?" "I want you to come see me." I gave a bitter laugh. "Please, champ. I need to see you." I felt bile rising in my throat, burning as I hissed. "What for? What on earth could you possibly need to see me for?" There was a pause before his voice crackled. "Because I need to tell you why I did it. I need you to know, and only you." I almost hung up, but something inside me wouldn't allow it. I was choking up. This was a nightmare, and it was bubbling to the surface faster than I could process. He wanted to tell me? What the fuck? He'd gone 10 years without talking to the cops about motive, process, or anything when it came to his victims. He was an indiscriminate killer masquerading as a family man. This was a ruse. It was some kind of ploy to exert power over me. That's how his kind worked. I knew all of this, but I couldn't act as I did. Somewhere, deep under the hatred and spite, a part of me still wanted my grandfather. I hated him for that. "Why now?" I said. "Why now after all this time?" "My date is coming up soon, sport," he said. "And what I need to say is too important to follow me to the grave. Then tell the cops." "They wouldn't believe me," he said. "And if they did, there's no telling if they're infiltrated." The hell does that mean? I heard a voice on the other end tell my grandfather to hurry up. "I've got to go." "Please, Frankie," he said. "Please come see me, and I promise it'll be the last time. What I need to tell you is best done face to face." The line went dead after that. I was left standing by the wall receiver. The cord was wrapped so tightly around my finger that it was starting to turn purple. I always fidgeted like that when I felt like I was in trouble. My mother couldn't beat the habit out of me, and Lacey hadn't really noticed it. "Who was that, honey?" I heard her ask from the other room. I finally released the cord from my blue finger. I'd never told her about Grandpa. No one, I said, just some telemarketer. I never told Lacey where I was going, only that I needed to visit a sick relative on my mother's behalf. Not the best lie, but it worked for the most part. Lacey saw me off with a kiss and told me to drive safely, and I told her I would. That was a lie in its own right, as I nearly had a panic attack and swerved into a semi an hour in. The closer I got to prison, the more I shook. I was hyperventilating by the time I pulled into the parking lot. And had it not been for a rosary my mother made me hang in my car window, I probably would have got worse. I'm not that religious, and I'm definitely not Catholic like the rest of my family. But the repetition, pace, and memories I associated with reciting the prayers helped me in some small way. I ended up placing the rosary in my pocket before going in, and thankfully, it wasn't confiscated by security. Apparently, my grandfather, despite being on death row, was allowed some small aspect of freedom. He was on good behavior, somehow, and apparently even ministered to his fellow inmates, at least according to the guard who escorted me to the conference cell. He was able to convince a lot of people that he was a safe man to be around, and one who needed little attention for correction. He worked his best to make it easy to forget about the bodies. I was led into a large center block room with 2 metal chairs and a steel table. There was a guard at the corner of the white room and a strong scent of floor cleaner. It gave off the same sterile, bleak vibe of a hospital hallway. Too clean, too unassuming. I took my seat and waited, anxiously bouncing my knee as every second passed. I didn't even have my phone on me to check the time. I was halfway through digging a hole in the pocket of my cardigan when the buzz came. The guard at the corner of the room cleared the door, and the sound of clinking metal became audible. There was a polite exchange of "pardon me" and "thank you," as the man I once knew as my loving grandfather entered the room, smiling. His head was bald and shone with the same sterile gleam of the humming ceiling lights. He was clean-shaven and nearly hairless, save for his eyebrows, and his teeth were yellow with age. He bared them in a small smile that I did not return. That didn't diminish his resolve as he was led by the arm to his chair. His hand and leg cuffs jangled like the bells he'd ring for Christmas to raise money for charity, back when I still believed he had good in him. At that moment, even with the sight of his orange jumpsuit burning my eyes, I still wished that was a man I saw now. The guard sat him down, connected his cuffs to a hook on the table, and then joined the other guard at the opposite corner of the room. My grandfather looked at me, smiling and quaint, as I stared at him loathingly. Any uneasiness in my heart was gone as fear gave way to contempt. I was filled with nothing less than loathing for him and the mask he wore. "You've grown, Sonny," he said with a small laugh. "Yep." He clenched his fists as if testing to make sure the joint still worked. Then he finally said, "Thank you for coming, Frankie." "Just Frank," I told him. "Only that." "Right. Of course. I'm sorry, I know it's been too long. What's this about?" I asked, "Why the hell did you want to see me?" "You're my grandkid," he said. "No. Frank M. asterisk 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 was your grandkid. I have a new last name because Googling that alone shows a crime scene photo of your backyard. Blood is blood, Frank." I agree, I told him, heat filling my throat and chest. "It makes sense. Blood is blood, just like the people you murdered who had those same relations, right? Moms? Dads? Brothers and sisters? That shit didn't stop you from Dash." "Frank," he said in a low, stern voice I hadn't heard since childhood. There was no smile on his face now, just a perpetual frown of sad regret. "Please, you came all this way and have done so much more than I'd expect you to. But I need you to listen. Please, Frank, His hands began to tremble as he looked skyward with dull eyes. "Frank, I'm scheduled for this evening." I felt my stomach drop, but didn't understand why. I thought I'd be happy to hear that. But instead, I was dumbstruck. Some part of me still mourned the man I once knew, and I had no good way to hide it. This afternoon, I said, half question, half statement. "It's been in the works a long time, Sonny," he said. "I told you it was almost here. But I didn't know you meant Dash." I stopped myself and breathed. "What time?" He leaned back in his chair, as far as the cuffs would let him inside. My date with the chair is at 6 today. It was 4:15 when I came in. Last meal is right after this. I get to have prime rib, mashed potatoes, and my favorite wine. Do you like Chianti? It's excellent stuff. I had it once with your grandmother when we were in Dash. Wait. Stop. Just stop. I couldn't even find the words. What the fuck are you even saying right now? Language, Frank. Are you kidding me? Listen, Frank Dash. No, you listen. I leaned in close to the table and whispered at the loudest possible volume. It's been a decade since I saw you last, and longer since you were a meaningful part of my life. Do you know what it's like to have your father sit you down at the age of 12 and repeat your new last name to you over and over again until you're scared to even think of your old one? When most kids turn 16, they get a car and a girlfriend. Instead of that, I got the nerve to search up your crime scene photos, see exactly what you did. He stopped trying to defend himself and looked at me with an unnatural pity. I mean, killing people, chopping them up. What sick bastard burns his victims with acid? Can you tell me that? How could a man go from picking up his grandkid from youth group and then take him for ice cream when he knows there are bodies in his backyard? Can you tell me that? My grandfather sat in silence for a long while before he finally received a tap on the shoulder from one of the guards. 15 minutes. We were told, in 15 minutes, I'd never see my grandfather again, and I could live my life away from him and his sins. Yet a part of me still ached. I hadn't even realized I started crying. He reached for my hand, and I didn't have the strength to pull it away. Do you remember that night when they took me away? He asked. I didn't respond, but he didn't wait for me to continue. We just finished camping down by the creek, and I told you that something bad was coming. You caught 2 fish and cried when one of them died. I told you it'd be all right, and we buried it in the soil of the riverbank. From earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. I haven't been to church in a long time. Grandpa. I was shocked that I called him that. He laughed. Funny enough, neither have I. Just the same, I read my scriptures every day and pray the rosary. Good for you. He looked off into nothing, as if projecting a memory in his mind like a film. I believe in demons, Frank, even if you don't. I've seen things in this life that don't make sense on this side of eternity, and that still haunt me when I close my eyes. He looked at me and smiled. I'm not afraid to die if it means I get to forget about those things. I want to, but I also need you to understand that I don't regret what I did. My blood ran cold. Frank, he said, I know how that must sound, and there's no way I have the time to tell you everything you need to know, but I need you to stay until after the execution dash. No, I said, there's no way. Frank, he almost pleaded with me now. For the love of God, I need you to stay. I need you to know. Someone has to know, and you're the only person I trust. Trust with what? You've had 10 years to come clean. He paused and then asked, did you ever wonder why I assaulted him? I moved my mouth but couldn't make a word. Did it ever strike you as odd that they could never identify the bodies? I dissolved them with acid, yes, but beyond recognition, not an ounce of DNA remained, not a tooth matched the dental record. If you need to hear me say all of the gritty details, so you can know without a doubt it was me who did it, then I'll say it all. I cut off their heads with an axe and buried them upside down. I burned their bodies and faces with sulfuric acid, and I kept them buried inside contractor bags filled with the stuff. I did it 4 times over, and I'd do it 100 times again given the choice. His voice lowered, and the anger in his face had given way to fear. It had to be done. I mustered a hoarse voice and asked, why? He twisted his chains around his fingers in that same tense way that I fidgeted. I was near the point of passing out, as he said, to keep them from growing back. I didn't have the chance to say anything else as a guard walked over and announced his time was up. Wait. I stood up and tried to talk the guards into a few more moments with him. Please. Joe, wait. What does that mean? What the hell does that mean? They led him away, and as he passed, he said something, half to himself and half to me. Do not believe every spirit, he said, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. He was silenced with the slam and lock of a door, and I was let out into the main reception room. They asked me if I wanted to check out, and told me I could have no more visiting time with him. I wanted to leave, take my things, and drive in silence the entire ride home, but I stood at the front desk and shook. For whatever reason, I asked to stay for the execution. They had me sign a few papers, and asked me what my relationship to him was. My hand trembled as I wrote down grandson. As I sit and wait to be led back to the room where I'll watch my grandpa die, I'm typing this out. I keep repeating his words in my head to keep them from growing back. What the hell does that mean? Story 3. My grandfather on death row confesses motives to me, part 2. When my grandfather was executed, my phone was taken once again, and I was escorted down a long hallway by a lanky guard with a blank face. His eyes seemed almost glazed over, and he wouldn't make eye contact with me. Not that I imagined he'd want to, but the coldness of his demeanor only lent to the growing dread I felt in my stomach. He moved in a rigid march that had no doubt been drilled into him from years on the job, making no extra movements except to scratch his neck. After several turns and steel doors, I was led into the observation room for the execution. There was an array of folding chairs placed before a glass window. On the other side was a chair in all its brutal glory, sitting quietly and patiently for its next appointment. It was gut-wrenching to see, even if I believed my grandfather deserved it. The thaw of the volts convulsing through my own head made me dizzy as I sat down and waited for the appointed time. While I was sitting there, it dawned on me that I wouldn't be the only viewer. The victims' families, the investigators, surely they'd arrive too, and I'd be left as a stranger in the room. I was the grandson of a man who brutally murdered their loved ones. However, as I watched the clock inside the execution room and counted down the minutes as they drew nearer, no one else came. There was only the guard and me. He stood at his post by the door and gazed on with a 1,000-yard stare and never broke eye contact with the imaginary horizon in anticipation of someone's arrival. I almost missed when clock struck 6 and my grandfather was led into the room. He was wearing his jumpsuit, but this time without the full body cuffs. He moved as innocently as a lamb to an altar, calm the entire way, and with noble dignity he didn't deserve. My chest turned as his escorts restrained him to the chair and placed a contraption on his head. A priest was in the room as well, reading a passage that was barely audible to me, but that my grandfather seemed to mouth word for word. Then one of the executioners, resolute in his blue uniform, stepped forward and gave some legal spiel about his crimes and the execution thereof. Just like the guard in my room, he was near robotic in his delivery. Finally, he asked, "Does the condemned have any final remarks?" The priest, confused, tried to say something about him requiring the last rites before his death, and that it had been allowed by both the governor and the warden of the prison upon his execution. The guard didn't even look at the priest. Instead, he said again in the same tone, "Does the condemned have any final remarks?" My grandfather, full of serenity, locked eyes with me. His stare burned me. "Go home, Frank," he said. "There's something in the woods you need to see." I wasn't brave enough to show you then. I didn't realize how little time we had. "Go back home, Frankie, and see it. Then you'll understand." He paused a brief moment more before saying, "I love you." The hood was dropped over his eyes, and nods were exchanged between the two guards. The switch was flipped without warning, and the priest crossed himself. I found myself clutching the rosary in my pocket as I witnessed his body convulse. Within seconds, he was still, and my guard tapped my shoulder to lead me out. I was so stunned by his words and the rush of emotions that I didn't even process what had happened until I was in the hallway. Somewhere along the walk back, reality set in, and I collapsed on my knees and puked. Even writing this now, I'm still struggling to revisit those emotions. That said, I don't have a choice. I need to get this down and face it. I need to tell you about what he left me. When I was checking out the front and signing papers all over again, The woman at the desk asked if I would like to sign for some belongings he'd left. I was the only next of kin that had shown up, the only anybody who'd shown up, and if I didn't want it, it had passed into storage. It'll get auctioned off eventually, she told me. Might as well take it and make some cash. There are plenty of sickos who collect these bastards' things. You want it. I was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. As fucked up as the logic is, the worst case scenario was that I ended up with a box of fire kindling for my next camping trip. Best case, I'd find an answer to all of the crazy bullshit he'd said so far, but I doubted it. I signed for his few belongings, and they were about as meager as I expected. A singular brown box with his last name printed across the top. When I got to my car, his last words still bouncing around in my skull, I opened the box and started rooting around inside. There were no answers to my questions at first glance. There was a crucifix, a rosary, a Bible, a catechism, and a red scarf that looked like it had been knit by a fingerless grizzly bear. Great, I told myself. Can't wait to type out that online listing. I was half ready to throw the entire thing out of my car and risk a littering fine outside of prison. But then my eyes were caught by something tucked in the pages of his catechism, folded under everything else, almost inconspicuous next to the numerous pages, was a letter. It was clearly more than a little beat up, but the writing on its cover was clear enough to make me freeze in my tracks. For Frank, it said, in case of the worst. I grabbed it out and shoved everything else to the side. I read the writing over again, making sure I wasn't dreaming, and then eagerly opened it. It said, the next conquest will be silent. I stopped and rubbed my eyes before continuing. There are stranger things on Earth than we could ever dream in nightmares. They're already here, Frank, and they're becoming more common. His words were creeping up the back of my mind once more. Behind our old house is a graveyard. You have a relative there, and it's there I buried the book. But you must be careful. Do not touch the thorns, and pray that the earth I salted when you were young has held strong. If the sapling has grown, you must not touch it. No matter what you see, do not touch it. Its fruit could be anywhere. It could be anyone. The things they do to your mind are nothing short of unholy. Trust no one, not even your parents. We were so close to the start of it all. I don't even know if your father is really my son anymore. I stared at that line for so long, I thought the paper would catch on fire. The book is buried beneath the broken cross. You'll need a trowel to get to it. I wish I could explain everything to you and that you believe me outright, but I know that's a fool's mission. I can only lead to what will help you understand. You can do this. You need to do this. If you encounter one of the fruits, do not eat with it. You'll know them by their mark. He signed it, and below his name, there was a clipping from a newspaper. It was clearly a printout taken from some archive because the quality of the images and text was shit, but not unreadable. It was some local gazette dated June 1932. The headline of the article and its brief sentence bore something that shocked me. Body found. Botanist dead from suicide. Beneath its large lettering was a tiny blurb that was barely a paragraph. Man was pulled from the sea, dead from drowning. He is believed to be John. I paused as I read my last name written on the page. That alone was enough to make me start to spin. But the next sentence almost drove me to insanity. Strange thorn-like protrusions were discovered sprouting from his entire body. Their cause is unknown. I heard him again. Go home, Frank, he'd said. There's something in the woods you need to see. Guys, I don't know what the fuck any of this means. I'm staying in a motel off of the highway, and I don't know what to do. Lacey thinks I'm just spending the night at a relative's place. She didn't ask any follow-up questions, so I think I'm off the hook, but it's hard for me to even process that lie right now. Every single rule of survival in nature is telling me to get back to my house with my fiancée, and to write all of this off as the crazed ramblings of a serial killer. Papa Joe is dead, and there is no obligation I have to listen to any of this, but I can't stop thinking about it. I've been doing some fact-checking and searching since I checked in here, and this newspaper clipping is legit. The man who died, the man with my old last name, boarded a transport vessel going out to sea, and then jumped into the Atlantic when land was out of sight. The captain was interviewed for the papers, and he said that the man left no personal belongings besides 2 books. A diary that contained a suicide note was left on his cabin desk, and a black, leather-bound book in German, presumably a Bible, was found in the trash bin, surrounded by paper ash. The book itself was unburnt. They were given to his extended family, and he was buried somewhere in their plot. I don't want to believe any of this. I don't want to see anything more about this, but I keep hearing his pleas. I have to go home. I have to go back to his house and into the woods. There are too many coincidences for me to ignore. God help me. I can't help myself. I need to know who my grandfather really was. I need to know more about what drove him to what he did. If anyone who knows me sees this, please don't tell Lacey. I wouldn't want her to worry. I'll let you all know what I find. Story 4. I think there's something wrong with my CAPTCHA. I don't really know how to explain this without sounding like I'm exaggerating, but something incredibly weird has been happening with a CAPTCHA on a site I've used 100 times before. I'm not even someone who gets freaked out easily. I've seen enough broken government websites to know that half the time the glitch is just because someone's nephew coded it in 2008. But this feels different. It feels intentional. It started when I tried to log into my student tax portal last week. Everything loaded fine except the CAPTCHA box, which was just an empty white square. No prompt, no images, nothing. I thought maybe it failed to load, so I clicked refresh. The box didn't fill in. Instead, text appeared above it. Select all images that belong to you. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds trying to figure out if that was even grammatically correct. There weren't any images to select anyway, so I assumed it was a bug and closed the whole page. I didn't think much of it, and honestly I was more annoyed than unsettled. The second day, I tried logging in again. The prompt changed. This time it said, "Prove that you're the correct user." Still vague, still weird, but at least a grid appeared. Except the images were impossibly blurry, like someone had taken low-res screenshots of other low-res screenshots. Each tile showed something that looked almost familiar. Maybe a street or a ceiling or a face, but distorted in the way dreams feel when they slip away, barely recognizable until the moment you try to focus on them. When I hovered over the third tile, the blur sharpened just enough that I recognized my bookshelf, my exact shelf. With the crooked textbook, I always pretend I'll revisit and that I spent way too much money on. The photo had been taken from an angle I couldn't place, as if someone had leaned in from the doorway while I wasn't looking. I didn't even click. I closed the page, but the image lingered in my brain far longer than I wanted it to. It escalated the next night. My laptop was asleep. I was scrolling on my phone. Everything was normal until I heard my laptop's fan quietly spin up. Not loud, but enough to know it had woken itself. I didn't touch it. I didn't even go near it. Just stared at it for a good moment until suddenly it chimed with the notification sound I get when a web page sends a prompt. I went to the laptop and opened it out of curiosity. The same CAPTCHA box was open. I hadn't logged in. I hadn't even opened the browser. This time the prompt simply read, "Thank you. Verification in progress." There was no grid and images, just that line. The words looked oddly centered, too precise for a normal CAPTCHA, as if someone had manually placed them there. Then I noticed that my webcam's light was turned on. I froze. It wasn't even the usual, "Oh no, someone's spying on me," because this was worse. I wasn't even running anything. There was no meeting, no call, no app that should have access. The little green LED glowed steadily, like an eye opening. I reached up and covered the camera with my hand. The text changed immediately. Obstruction detected. I didn't remove my hand. The light stayed on while I processed what was happening. New text appeared. "Do not interfere. Process is almost complete." And that was it. No explanation, no cancel option. Just those words glowing on the screen while the webcam light stared at me. I shut the laptop so fast the hinge clicked. I didn't open it again for the rest of the night. Today it followed me. I switched to my phone because I genuinely didn't trust a laptop anymore. Threw it out almost immediately. I avoided the tax site completely. I didn't sign in anywhere new. I even cleared my browser history, like some kind of ritual cleansing. Then, around noon, my phone froze for a moment that a white square appeared in the middle of the screen, covering up a portion of my wallpaper. It wasn't from any app one recognized. The outline of a 3x3 grid flickered faintly, like a watermark slowly bleeding through paper. Then the text appeared. Final verification needed. I don't think I even breathed. The grid loaded without my input. 9 images, perfectly clear this time. They were all pictures of me. Photos taken from angles that suggested someone had been standing in my doorway, or next to my bed, or behind me while I studied. The lighting in some of them was the same dim yellow in my room at 3 a.m. In one, I was lying on my side, hair half across my face, clearly asleep, above the grid. Confirm identity. I didn't touch anything. I locked the phone immediately, but I swear I could feel my own pulse in my fingers. The worst part isn't even the photos, it's that the CAPTCHA is no longer asking me to prove I'm human. Now it's asking me to prove I'm me, and I have this horrible, growing suspicion that it'll follow me on whichever device I use. I haven't opened the phone again. I'm typing this on a computer in a library before I forego all my electronic devices to the secondhand market. If you ever see a CAPTCHA asking you to identify yourself, I fear it's too late. Story 5. Something is in my room while I sleep. There's 2 things I can tell. The first is that it's there. The second is that it's doing its best to make sure I don't know that it's there. It's quiet is what I mean. So quiet that I keep second-guessing myself in the night. In the day, too, even as I'm writing this. But I'm positive something is there. It's small things, just frequent, consistent. Something scratching against the hardwood floor. The sheets at the far corner. The ones hanging off the edge of my bed, sliding as something goes past them underneath. I leave clothes on my desk chair a lot. I hear those too. See, it sounds like when I used to have a pet cat, the way something small and nocturnal does moving around your space in the middle of the night, aware that you're there. But I haven't had a cat in years, and never in this apartment. I live with 3 roommates in this weird kind of place. Not spooky weird, but it's an old house that got converted into apartments by putting walls in weird places. So I have this closet that's underneath the next door apartment staircase. The ceiling of my closet is diagonal, and it stretches really far back once you go inside. We filled it up with boxes and extra things that didn't have a place yet when we moved in and haven't gotten around to unpacking. So it's kind of maze right there in my bedroom. I'm pretty sure that's where it goes during the day. I haven't checked too deep since I'm honestly worried about finding it. You're asking why I don't sleep on the couch or move altogether. Last night was the first night I felt sure it was there. Like I said, it's so on the line of being nothing that I kept dismissing it. It's just the house settling. Winter heating causing expansion or something. You know, when you throw a sweater on the back of a chair and it takes an hour to fall to the ground and make a noise even though nothing's touching it, I kept dismissing it as that kind of thing. There's always a plausible explanation. Maybe that's how it gets by. The suspicion's been growing for a while. Last night made me sure. I've been having more trouble falling asleep. Usually fall asleep to a video playing, white noise or something. Last night, my phone died. My charger was across the room. I didn't feel like getting up since it was 1 a.m. or something. So I just lay there in the dark, eyes closed, trying to make myself fall asleep. I can't get to sleep, but I guess enough time went by that it seemed like I was sleeping. I start to hear it again. Just barely. You know when you have to focus to hear something. Otherwise you'll miss it. Tapping on the floor from my open closet door. Softer padding when it gets to a carpet. It brushed up against the blanket hanging off my bed. I could feel it there. I heard it breathing, and that was it. It's low to the ground, which is why I was thinking of a pet or something earlier. Who knows? Maybe it's a rat or rodent or something. That's a plausible explanation. But this sounded like human breathing, kind of high and wheezing. I could hear that its mouth was open. My eyes open. I couldn't help it. Maybe my body tensed. I heard the breathing stop, like it could tell. For whatever reason, my instinct was to close my eyes and pretend I was asleep. You know how sometimes you'd be up late as a kid, you'd hear your parents, and you'd know to pretend to be asleep a second before they walked in? I felt like that, except cold all over. I could hear it walking again, so softly and carefully. I could feel it get closer and closer to my face. I could feel the presence of it even with my eyes closed, the sense that something was there, the body heat of it or something. I knew if I opened my eyes, I'd be face to face with it. Part of me wanted it just so that I could know, but I couldn't do it. The worst part was that it just stayed there, that close to me, unmoving but breathing quietly. It didn't do anything, didn't touch me, didn't go anywhere else, but just stayed there for hours. And I mean hours. I didn't sleep the whole night. At some point, I felt it leave, and minutes later, I felt sunlight hitting my closed eyes. It was dawn, 7 in the morning. That was this morning. It's almost night again. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't sleep here tonight. But I don't want to leave it alone with the people I live with. And I know I'm going to sound crazy if I try to explain what I experienced. But I know what I know. I know that it's there. Story 6. My friend found a cat in a deserted rest stop bathroom. I wish he had left it there. Mason has lived with me for a while, but I still don't know what he is. I only know what he pretended to be. My friend Dave was driving on the I-25 when he stopped at a rest stop. The place was empty, deserted. There was no toilet paper or soap in the bathroom, satanic graffiti on the walls, and syringes lying on the bathroom floor. As he was about to walk out the door, he heard a faint meow coming from the bathroom stall. Then a cat crawled out of there. It had dark fur, yellow glowing sulfurous eyes, and ears that stretched high above its head. It did look like a kitty, but its body was large, probably the size of a normal adult cat. The meows were loud, and it seemed in real distress. My friend said that he felt a strong feeling of compassion for the animal. His heart was torn apart hearing those calls. He decided to take it home with him. Unfortunately, he has 2 cats, and both started acting strangely and kept their distance from the one he brought. My cat had passed away recently, so when he asked if I'd like to take care of Mason, I agreed. His story tugged at my heart. My last kitten was also a stray, so I happily took him in. From the start, it was obvious there was something different about Mason. Mason kept growing. Within a week, he was about the size of a medium dog. The strange thing is that he barely ate any food. Most of the food in the bowls would be left half-eaten, and I rarely refilled his water dispenser. I thought about taking him to the vet, but I had barely any money to get by, and the vet bills were so expensive. My last savings went toward caring for my previous cat. At night, he would start meowing in strange screeches that sounded like a deer in heat. His appearance started to change, too. The hair was getting shorter but darker, while the eyes were taking on a more rounded shape with the pupils changing to a strange red color. His paws were the first to start losing hair. By this time, they were almost bald. The fingers on his paws grew longer, and his claws got wider and sharper. Was this some kind of wild animal? One day, he scratched me so badly that I almost had to go to the ER. I couldn't do it anymore. Mason started to give me the chills. I considered taking him to an animal shelter. Dave was coming over for dinner and some beers that night. He arrived early, and we sat around drinking before the lasagna finished. Did you notice anything strange about Mason? Yeah, my cats would stay far away from him, not even fight him. Just look at him with fear. Also, the way I found him. I told you how weird the bathrooms looked, right? Yeah, all the satanic graffiti and stuff. Yep. Well, I went to the stall, and when I walked out, I heard Mason meow. Then he crawled from under the stall. It was dark inside, but I'm pretty sure I would see a cat, especially one like him. He was pretty big for a kitten. I felt hair on my arms rise. "Why are you asking?" Dave said, "Something's off about him. He's been growing like crazy. His fur is starting to fall off, and his eyes have been turning into strange shapes. Plus, he's been making these awful sounds the past few nights. I wanted to show him to you, but I don't know where." Then the strange shrieks came out of the bathroom again. This time, they were much louder than before, rambling through the whole house. They didn't sound like an animal anymore. They had turned into ear-piercing, inhumane, low-pitched screams. Nothing alive should sound like that. Dave and I jumped in our seats. Dave stared at me with a look of bewilderment. Then loud footsteps echoed through the hall. The house was shaking with each step. The smell of copper filled the air. A wave of cold shot through my spine, blurring my vision. Dave's eyes were open wide with terror. I quickly got up from my stool. My hands shakily searched for a knife in the drawer. When I looked up, Mason, or whatever he turned into, stood in the door. He was now about 6'4", standing on his back 2 legs. His hair was all gone, and pink skin shone under the kitchen lights. His paws were deformed into something between an animal's and a human's hand with sharp, wide claws. The ears were long and hung over his head. His eyes were yellow with red pupils at their centers. Mason let out another screech, and 2 rows of sharp teeth showed. His jaw started to extend. My whole body was shaking. I held the knife close to my chest, frozen in fear. Dave got off the chair and started backing up. Mason's eyes bulged out of their sockets and stared down at Dave. Before Dave could turn and run, Mason jumped at him and pinned him to the ground. He then started clawing at his body and face. Dave was screaming at the top of his lungs like a little child. I hesitated. Blood was rushing through my still, frozen body. I knew I had to act. I began stabbing Mason, but he didn't flinch. He kept clawing at my friend, tearing him apart until Dave went silent. Mason then started eating his remains, purring with every bite. The whole world was a blur. My stomach got nauseous. Then I heard the sounds of bone breaking and blood slurping. I stumbled into the hall and threw up on the floor. This awoke Mason from his feast. He looked my way and hissed at me. I immediately ran towards the door into the dark and knocked on my neighbor's door. The knife was still in my hand, and my clothes had Dave's blood all over them. The neighbors called the police. When they arrived, I tried to warn them of what they would find inside. I walked out to the street and stared at my door, fearing what they might let out, but when the door opened, only a cute small Mason walked out. My hands started shaking, and the whole world began to spin out of control. I quickly ran behind my neighbor's house and started writing this post. Mason is sitting by the window, smiling. He flashed his creature teeth and ran off. The police are coming up the driveway now, calling my name. They think it was me. I have to get away as soon as possible. Edit. I'm hiding in the woods now. Mason is out here somewhere, and he knows I ran. The trees are starting to shake, and his screeches are echoing through the forest. Story 7. I joined an underground wrestling company. My wrestling name is Machine Gunna Garrison. My real name will remain anonymous, and I have always had a great time being the heel. I love playing up my evilness to the crowd, making fun of their hometown, cussing at folks, or taking people's food/drinks. I work for a small promotion that you've probably never heard of. They're called Savage Championship Wrestling, or SCW for short. The company prided itself on being the most savage wrestling promotion ever made. Our promoter, Eli, prided himself on trying to emulate the greats in extreme wrestling. ECW, CZW, AW, and even the attitude and ruthless aggression eras of WWE. We prided ourselves on bloodshed, and Eli was always coming up with the wildest match stipulations imaginable. There were barbed wire ropes, barbed wire cages, barbed wire chairs. If he was bored and didn't know how to spice up a match, he'd add barbed wire. The worst of his ideas involved glass tables, which were just glass panes on wooden horses. I was picking the shards out of my back all night. It fucking sucked. But why did I put up with it? Well, at some point, You just hope that you're going to be picked up or noticed by one of the big promotions. I actually had a friend get picked up by the big promotions. They were jobbers, sure, but the pay was good. Yet, whenever I look in the mirror, I keep seeing myself age. I look like my dad. In fact, I could even imagine my father's condescending words speaking to me. Go on then, go become a wrestler. He says, just don't come crawling back when you're a cripple. That was 20 years ago, and the idea of joining the big leagues gets more distant with each year. It seems like with each passing year, the mold for what a wrestler should be just keeps shrinking. I'm big, strong, tall, but I'm also not pretty, I'm fat, and my forehead looks all fucked up. My promo skills have been shaky, but I've heard much worse. One day, we were somewhere in New Mexico, a small town, and we were in a local gym. The crowd filled the stands and the fold-out chairs on the floor. Eli pulls me aside before I get ready for a street rules match. You got a minute? He said. It's your time we're wasting, you booked it. We got someone in the crowd who's looking at you. A thin Mexican man is wearing a red suit with a golden cross around his neck. He's with a promotion south of the border. My mind raced. I'd always admired lucha libre, but before I could ask more, my music hit. I thanked Eli and made my way down to the ring. The match was standard stuff, a few good spots, and then we get nasty with the blood and really start selling our injuries like we're killing each other. I was dishing out some chair shots to Tim's back, the guy I was losing to, when I saw the guy Eli was talking about amongst the crowd of locals and wrestling fans in the gymnasium that night. He stood out as oddly sophisticated. The red suit was pressed, and upon his head sat a red cowboy hat. He sat with his legs crossed, wore shades, and smoked a cigarette that occasionally illuminated his thin face. While I was looking at him, I fucked up big time. The spot was supposed to be that I hit him in the back a few times. Then he jolts up and snatched a chair from me and gave me a DDT on it. But while I was looking at the guy, I brought the chair down the same time that Tim stood up. I clocked him in the head with it. Hard. The crowd let out an audible groan. The ref stared at me with fierce eyes, ran to check up on Tim, and then threw up the X sign with his arms. Paramedics rushed out, and I tried to play up the crowd, but deep down, I had a feeling that they knew I was scared. When I looked back, the man in red was gone. I went backstage after the match was called, and Eli was waiting for me, and he was pissed. The fuck were you thinking? I'm sorry, I slipped up. You fucked up. I wiped the blood from my face with a white towel, staining it pink. I asked, Tim gonna be okay? He's concussed, Gunner. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. I heard that chair shot from back here. I sat down and undid my boots. I kept my head down. I couldn't face him because I knew what he was saying was true. However, that's when the door opened from behind us, and the man in red walked in. His spurs jingled from his boots with each step. He never removed his shades. In the pale, white-tile locker room, he stood out with his bright red attire. He removed his hat and held it to his heart. He spoke with a thick accent. His voice was surprisingly deep, and his words rang out clearly. You wrestled good, he said. I appreciate it, but it wasn't my best day. I responded, far from it. Eli chimed in, No, it's perfect. The violence, the carnage. You showed real strength out there, gringo. You're flattering me, but thank you. He walked up to the bench across from me and sat down. He removed his glasses and saw his two black eyes staring at me with rabid fascination. I have a reverence for wrestling. So does my employer, whether it be Japanese, lucha libre, or American, such as yourself. It's an art form that dates back to the days of the traveling circus. In a way, we're all payasos. I smiled at him. I'd never thought of myself as a carny, but that's exactly how wrestling started. I extended my hand, and he shook it almost immediately. He grinned, revealing a perfect set of teeth. I'd like to offer you a chance to work in our promotion. It's a work in progress, but it's shaping up to be something truly special. Well, do you have a start date yet? You could start this week. We'll make accommodations. Eli stood up and shook his head. I'm sorry, but he's under contract to work at least 5 more shows here in the States. If you need him that badly, you're going to have to buy out his contract. Name your price. Eli's eyes widened, and then he looked at me with a startled, confused look on his face. The man rose to his feet and withdrew a fat wallet that was practically bulging with dollars. He opened it and forked over $1,000 like it was nothing. Eli stared at the money in his hand with disbelief. Need more? Yeah. He forked over another $1,000. Eli grinned and spoke with snarky tone. 10,000. The lie, my dash. And before I could say how much my contract was actually worth, the man gave him what he wanted without a moment's hesitation. Eli just stared at the money, slack-jawed, and then stuffed it hastily into his pocket. He jutted his hand out to seal the deal, and the man shook it. The man smiled and said, "Good doing business with your company." "Likewise. May I talk with him for a second in private?" "Sure." Eli walked away, and I heard him talking among the other wrestlers, chatting about upcoming shows. The man in red went to the corner of the room, grabbed a flower chair, and brought it in front of me. My employer's company thrives on violence. Extreme violence. There will be bloodshed, stitches, broken bones, but everything will be covered. You may not be insured? In a way, just not in the traditional sense. Okay, it's risky, I get it, but wrestling in general is like that. He nodded in agreement. I'm glad you understand. Where is this promotion of yours? It's in Mexico, but the exact whereabouts aren't disclosed to the public. It's more of a show for a privileged few, rich few. So these aren't the usual fans? Quite the contrary, these are super fans. They live for this entertainment. And our business offers the highest quality extreme wrestling experience they could buy. But are you willing to go through it? You've already paid my boss. Why keep asking? Seems like we're all in agreement, ain't we? I just want to be sure it's all. My business isn't for faint of heart. We had many quit or no-show entirely. We're trying to avoid these little incidents. Hell, I've had to deal with colleagues who showed up drunk in the ring. As long as there's a steady paycheck, I'm down for whatever. He stood up and donned his hat and sunglasses. He turned to me before he left and said, "When you're ready, we'll get you transportation." He handed me a card. It was solid black with gold numbers on it. "Call this number when you're ready. We'll have a room ready for you, and we'll discuss your first match. Your starting pay will be $35,000. Cash." I felt like the wind was knocked out of me as soon as he left the room. Did I just fucking hear that $35,000? I returned to my room, and for a second I thought about calling my wife. We have a child back home, and she's not exactly fond of my line of work. She'd see me come home with cuts and bruises. On top of this, I'm not the best father. I'm not home as much as I want to, and when I get home, I always give her a half-ass gift, spend time with her, and then I'm off to my next gig. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm a deadbeat, but maybe I could work something out with this new company. With the pay I'm getting, maybe I can finally be there. Maybe I could even put her into college, get my wife a new house. And hell, I'm not getting any older, maybe I'll retire early. That night, I was sitting in front of a fully packed bag of clothes and personal items when I called the number on the card. The phone rang only once, and then a voice answered. "Buenas noches, senor, are you ready?" "I'm ready." "Bien, bien, bien. We'll be there shortly." "Okay, I'm at Dash. We know where you are." And then he hung up. It made me feel uneasy, but I rationalized it by thinking that maybe Eli told him where I was. I took my things and headed downstairs to the lobby, and I turned in my key card to the staff. When I exited the hotel into the humid New Mexico night, a limousine was waiting for me, back door hanging wide open. I had to duck my head to get in, and in the back seat was a man in red. Same suit, and he had a bottle of wine on ice. "Welcome to Lucha Libre del Infierno." He tapped on the glass behind the driver, and the window cracked down just a hair. "Sí, vamos a casa." "Ah, sí, Señor Rivas." The window rolled up, and then we were off. I noticed that I couldn't see exactly where we were going, because all the windows were blacked out. The only thing illuminated was the cabin of the limousine. I asked him, "So your name is Rivas?" He paused and palmed his face. "Me Dio. I can't believe I forgot to introduce myself. I was so wrapped up in business that I forgot to say my name. It's Antonio Rivas." My friends simply call me Tony Rivas. Well, it's nice to know you properly, I guess. Come, let's drink. Need anything before we head out to Mexico? Some food? Girls? Boys? I'll eat when I get there, and no thanks. I'm married. His face drooped slightly. He seemed almost sad. I see. I plan on getting my little girl into college. He nodded, and he started pouring the wine into the glass. To family, then, wherever they may be. I took the glass and raised it. To family. The drive to Mexico was long, but thankfully, I drank myself silly and passed out sometime halfway. I was awoken by Tony shaking me with a firm hand. We're here. I'll show you to your room. I stumbled from the limo and gazed at my surroundings. A vast stretch of desert, but within it was a large, featureless building that only had doors and air conditioning units sticking out of it. To the left of it was a large adobe hotel that was 2 levels tall, very wide, and had a pool in the center with palm trees sticking out around it. It was luxurious, albeit foreign, in the bare, rocky desert. It was still early morning, so the sun wasn't out, but its glow could still be seen on the horizon. Follow me. I'll show you to your room. I went with Antonio to my room, which was simple but very luxurious for someone who used to stay in sketchy hotels for gigs. There was a television, a big bed, hot walk-in showers, and even a menu on the bed for me to order from. Antonio and I walked to the balcony of the place, looking at the red morning sky. I was desperate for sleep, and Antonio told me, "Best rest up. Tomorrow's a big day for you." I didn't hesitate. I fell asleep almost immediately, and I was awoken by a knock at the door. The room was bright, and my head felt like it was full of scorpions. I stunk, and I was sweaty, but I answered the door regardless. It was Antonio. This time, he was wearing a bright blue suit with a matching hat. "Come, let's get you dressed. Best to take a shower first. I'll be waiting for you at the pool." I did as he said, and when I went down there, he was relaxing with a dozen other lookadors by the pool. None of them removed their masks. Their backs were bruised and scarred. I waved, and they waved back, but they wore apprehension on their faces. "Donde está su mascara?" one of them said. Antonio responded, "Pronto recibe su merecido." He got up and walked me over to the big building opposite the motels that the wrestlers stayed in. We walked in, and it was cold, refreshingly cold compared to humidity. I was walked to their locker room / dressing area. There was an elderly gentleman, his face coated in thick wrinkles, and his forehead was littered with scars. He was a wrestler, too. He looked to have bladed himself one too many times. "You must be the new lookador I've heard so much about," he hoarsely said. "Yes, I'm Dash. No names. From here on out, you live and die by the mask." "But I don't have one." "You will. I am the mask maker here. You must first decide on a name and who you are, and I will do the rest." It was a lot of pressure to decide a lookador name. I'd always liked my machine gun persona, and I felt like it's been with me for so long that I couldn't just abandon it. So I asked Antonio, "What is Spanish in machine gun?" "La ametralladora." "Then that's my name." The old mask maker smiled. "I'll see what I can do." He measured my head, made notes of my color, my features, and then I had to wait. It took no less than 3 hours. I got a knock at the door. I opened it to find a small box. I took off the lid and found a beautiful, dull silver mask with yellow and red highlights. The symbol in the center of my forehead is that of 350 caliber bullets. I donned it and looked in the mirror. In that moment, I felt transformed. From then on out, I was a lookador. That night, I received a call from Antonio saying, "You're debuting tonight." I've not rehearsed. I don't even know who I'm against. "Don't worry about it. I'll tell you when you head over to backstage." I went over, and joining us were dozens of the other guys. They complimented me on my mask in broken English. But the sentiment was there. In the short time I was there, these men were like friends already. I walked in to see that the lights from the mini arena were on, and it displayed a lush ring with decorative ring posts decked out in marigolds, red ropes, and a stark white ring mat. I was lacing up my boots when Antonio walked in and told the others to leave for a few minutes. "Your mask looks wonderful, amateur Ladora. Thanks. Just a heads up, there isn't a physical audience per se, but rather a digital one. So we're streaming then? Yes. I see. And what's my match on the card? First match. Your debut. You're facing Mert Roja. It's his retirement match, and it's going to be a splatter match. The goal is to coat the mat in his blood, or he'll cover it in yours. I was suspicious for a second and asked, that's a lot of blood to cover one ring with. I'm aware your employer is aware, but Mert Roja is not. You're booked to win, but he doesn't know, and the match is best as you see fit. What? You wanted to kill him or something? His face didn't change. He stared at me with a serious glare that chilled me. Goosebumps broke out over my skin. No, you signed up for this. Amigo, hold up your end of the bargain. You do fine out there, just pick a weapon and don't hold back. Before I could say anything, he was gone, and the others walked in, including Huerte Roja. He was lanky, tall, and noticeably older than the others. His mask looked like a red skull. What did he say, Amateur Ladora? I looked at him, losing all words in my mouth, and all I could get out was, he said to make sure it was extreme. He chuckled. Amigo, every match is extreme. You'll do fine. In gorilla position, I waited for my music to be called. From the other room, a deafening voice announced my arrival in a thunderingly loud voice. My music hit, and I walked through that curtain and pyro went off. It sounded like a machine gun. I looked around, trying to play up for a crowd, but there wasn't any. There was a lone man in the front of the ring. He was older, coated in tattoos, and he puffed a cigar. Next to him was Antonio, legs crossed, observing the match. In the corners of the tiny arena were armed guards, dressed in plain clothes, all carrying pistols and holsters. Surrounding the ring were cameramen, all of them wearing solid black masks to conceal their identities. Huerte Roja comes out, and the announcer gives him a grand entrance, listing title wins and accolades. But he noticeably stiffened up when he announced that this was a retirement match. Roja's demeanor changed entirely, and his body language, even with the mask, told me everything. He entered the ring and stared down at me, his eyes tired. So, you're the one who's gonna do it? I didn't know, Roja, I dash. Shut the fuck up and wrestle. He decked me with a stiff headbutt and exited the ring to grab a weapon. I was still seeing stars when I heard the bell go off. The match had officially started. He returned with a barbed wire baseball bat and started laying into my back. Blood rushed down onto the mat as I rolled out, clutching at my back. Roja was taunting me and hitting poses to an audience that wasn't there. I reached under the ring and found a staple gun. I rose to the ring and was almost hit by another swing from the bat. I ducked and speared him to the ground. I heard him wheezing. I'd knocked the breath from out of him. I took the staple gun, and I shot several staples into his chest and neck, and I finally put one in his wrist, so he dropped the bat. I gripped the bat and raked the barbed wire across his chest. He screamed in pain, and from the torn flesh, blood spilled out onto the mat. His chest glistened with dark red, the mat getting soaked up with blood. It was beginning to drench it. While he bled, I ducked out of the ring and withdrew a table along with a bag of thumbtacks. I heard clapping behind me and found that the older man, the man who I assumed was my employer, was grinning and clapping his hands. Antonio was smiling ear to ear as he blew smoke from his teeth. I returned to the ring and propped the table on the corner, and I felt Roja drop kick me. I was already trying my best to stay coordinated after the headbutt, but the drop kick set me into the table face first. I felt with splinter and crack, and my head smacked the bottom turnbuckle, none of which had paddling. I felt something warm pool at the top of my mask, and when I looked down at the mat, I saw that blood was flowing from my eye and mouth holes. I heard Roja pouring the thumbtacks onto the ring. When I got to my feet, I walked right into a scoop slam and landed a back fist into the tacks. It was sudden, sharp, and nauseating. I looked up, spotting Roja with the barbed wire bat again, and I had no choice but to roll out. More thumbtacks jammed themselves into my arms, torso, and back as I did so. Roja climbed down from a rope and swung wildly at me. The bat caught me in my arm, and I felt a muffled crunch. I didn't feel it, though Adrenaline has a way of making someone feel invincible. When he ripped the bat out of my arm, I kicked him in his balls. I didn't care if I fought dirty. It was survival. While he was reeling from the blow, I reached under the ring and grabbed a chair. I paused, thinking about how a fucked up chair shot got me into this mess. But I brought it down anyway. The smack of the steel chair against the skull was thunderous, and my employer even let out a little cheer. Rojas slumped to the ground, his chest still oozing blood. I tossed him into the ring, and he was limp. I got another table and flung it into the ring. I got back in and noticed that Rojas was losing lots of blood, and per the match stipulation, I had to coat the ring in it. So I grabbed his arms and dragged him around, staining the mat like I was using a human brush against a blank canvas. By the time I was done with him, the bell rang, and then I set the table in the corner and gave him my finisher. It was essentially a modified buckle bomb, but it did the trick. I flung Muerte Rojas' bloody body into the table, and it practically exploded. I was heaving for breath. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, and the pain was excruciating. My employer stood and clapped, and so did Antonio. My employer gestured to the tech crew below him to give him a mic. He tapped it to check if it was working, and then he spoke. Remove his mask. I had no choice, so I went to Rojas and yanked the mask off. His face was swollen, bruised, and bloody. His eyes were like little gems in a sea of swollen skin. His expression was that of utter exhaustion. Retire him. I looked at the man with confusion. Antonio looked on with fascination. I remembered our talk, and the match is best you see fit, he said. I got out of the ring and picked up the barbed wire bat. There were still bits of skin and meat stuck in the barbs. It was slick with blood. I gripped the handle and grabbed it with my one good arm. I rolled into the ring, and when I stood over Rojas, he just stared at me with tired eyes. He spoke in a whisper. Turn me over. I don't want to see it coming. There wasn't much I could do, but I did grant him this one kindness. I flipped him over, and with a hard swing, I brought the bat down on his skull. I did it over and over again until the hair clumped up in the wire, and until his skull was mashed on the mat. There were cheers from the two men, and clapping from the guards stationed around the building. They bowed, and in turn, I bowed right back. I felt sick, but I couldn't show it. I was a performer. When I returned backstage, I was met with applause and celebration by the lookadors in the back. They didn't care about what I'd done, but they said that my match was spectacular to watch. I was given stitches, and the doctor, if he really was one to begin with, sewed up my arm. I would be out for a little while, but everyone said they were looking forward to my return to the ring. I've been wrestling for Lucha Libre del Infierno for a decade now. I've been wiring money back home for as long as I can remember. I've had hundreds of matches, and I've retired many lookadors. I have battle scars, I've broken many bones, and I've lost my fair share of blood. All of it for a rabid fan base that I'll never see or meet, but I'm told I'm a fan favorite. Yet, I write this now as my final confession, because a new wrestler has joined our little troupe, and I believe this might just be my retirement match. So to all my fans out there, thank you for your support and admiration. I hope that when I post this, I am still the last man standing in the ring. La Amachuladora, November 19th, 2025. Story 8. I don't have a dog. I live in a tower block only accessible through a dual rail/motor tunnel. Years ago it was some kind of military base, but was repurposed into residential housing. The place is pretty bleak, and everyone who lives here moved or stayed for the same reason. We wanted isolation. Being so isolated, effectively an island really. We have all the amenities required to survive alone. There's a gym, an elementary school, a doctor, police station, and a few stores. I work in a simple convenience store on the 4th floor. I woke up on a cold winter morning to find my giant white golden doodle laying in bed with me. She kept me warm, and her familiar popcorn smell made me smile immediately as I came to full consciousness. I patted her head, and we got up together. While I got dressed, she went into the living room and propped herself up on the windowsill to look out at the completely white outdoors. It was one hell of a snow flurry. There were no dog bowls or food in the kitchen. I made a mental note to pick up some things on my way back from work, but she was a big girl and could cope without one meal. Leaving a ceramic bowl of water in the kitchen, I gave her a farewell pat and went on my way. In the ancient but reliable elevator, I bumped into Agnes Keller, a middle-aged woman from the 9th floor. She was dressed in her typical pink garbs. Agnes worked in the doctor's office with Dr. Pyre. What shocked me was that her creased face was split into a smile. She was famously one of the most dour people in the building. I don't think I had seen anything before today beyond a scowl from the woman. I gave her a simple hello and did not want to spoil her good mood by making inquiries. However, she explained herself unprompted. Her son had told her a funny joke this morning. Funny thing was, Agnes did not have a son. Marcus Lynn was pacing the store with a clipboard in hand and looked me over with his typical mixture of contempt and dissatisfaction. My manager got me to work right away, dipping into the back to replace inventory. Being isolated as we were, the storage area behind the store was enormous and packed with emergency supplies beyond the standard fare. Lynn liked to run the store as if we were in the middle of a tourist packed center. I put up with his dictatorial leadership style because it made the days go by quickly. After our morning rush hour, approximately 6 people, I went down the aisle where we kept the dog food. A peculiar thought entered my mind as I perused the slim offerings. I remember a conversation with Lynn where he complained that the only reason we had to stock any damn dog food was because of Mrs. Innes on floor 2. She was the only person in the building that had a dog. Lynn excused me for my legally required 15-minute break, and I headed back to my place with a can of dog food in hand. My manager did not comment on that purchase. The dog was sitting on my sofa and watching TV. It had such a familiar smell, and even simply seeing the fluffy creature overpowered my sense of unease with serene pleasantness. She rushed towards me and nuzzled against my leg, earning her a belly rub. I gave no thought as to how she had turned on my TV. She greedily wolfed down the dog food and wagged her tail. Lynn would give me a long lecture if I took longer than I was permitted, so I left the dog with a promise to take her for a walk during my longer lunch break. Only when I was back in the elevator did I realize that I could not remember my own dog's name. When I returned to the store, I was surprised to find Lynn missing. He never left the store unattended and had his breaks there eating noodles and critiquing me. Then I found his handwritten note. He was going to spend his lunch break at home with his wife. Mr. Lynn was not married. My head started to feel murky as I tried to piece together my morning. An overwhelming feeling of dread crept up from my feet, causing my skin to prickle and hair to stand on end. Again and again, I repeated the vivid memory of waking up next to my dog and later seeing it sitting on the sofa. Why had I remembered it being white and fluffy? Standing in the store, struggling to contain a scream, I knew for an absolute certainty that the thing waiting for me in my apartment was in fact thin, gray, and had sharp teeth. Story 9. I stepped onto the subway tracks and followed someone into the dark, and something in the dark followed me back. I've never been one of those bleeding hearts who walk from train car to train car handing out sandwiches to the homeless. Those self-gratifying, holier-than-thou posers. What were they going to do with 2 slices of white bread and a slice of fake cheese? I was a case manager for the Department of Social Services. I dealt in logistics and in bed allotments, and I prided myself on my ability to look at a screaming man smeared in his own feces and feel nothing, smell nothing, want nothing except to process his file. You see, the quality you want in a social worker is an empathy. That's a dime a dozen. What you needed was efficiency. There are over 200,000 homeless people in New York at any given moment, and they outnumbered us, the social workers, 5 to 1. Unlike those reverse panhandlers, I knew efficiency was the grease that kept the gears turning, and that was why I got promoted to senior case manager only 1 year into the job. A few years after my promotion, though, and I'm sleeping in a box behind a bodega in Astoria. Shivering my ass off because of wind coming off the East River grows teeth in the winter. I smell like a wet dog and I look worse. I know this. When people walk by me, they avert their eyes or try really hard to not see me in the first place. This is all because of Magda. I'd first met Magda in the police station. She was a semi-permanent fixture in the Union Square station. You know her type. Layers of mismatched with coats all 4 seasons of the year, legs wrapped in plastic bags, and pushing a cart filled with garbage. She was picked up for aggressive panhandling and disturbing the peace. Magda had been screaming at tourists and passers-by for years, but that day one of those passers-by had been a cop, and so she became my problem. "We're going to get you into a shelter, Magda," I said, clicking my pen. "We have a bed tonight in the Bronx." "No," she yelled, slamming a dirt-caked hand on the table. "Of course not. Why make it easy?" "It's too far," she continued, projecting crumbs and spittle all over me in the police interrogation desk. "I have to go back. I have to stay close to my boys. You can't make me leave." I wiped my face. Her files did say she'd had 2 dependents at some point. No clue where they are now, but they weren't in the tunnels of Union Square Station. "I can make you leave, Magda. It's literally my job." That's not true. My job was technically find her a place to stay, but realistically you take the difference and settle on just keeping people like her out of sight. "The mole people," she said, leaning in, "they want my boys. They'll go hungry and they'll gobble my boys right up." God damn, not this again. You'd be surprised, but Magda's situation is actually pretty cliche. You see, it's surprisingly hard to end up homeless in New York. There's a constant game of musical chairs with the city-funded shelters, and we do a pretty good job of filtering out the down on your luck from the batshit crazy. So unless you were truly clinically insane, you had a pretty good shot at getting yourself out of whatever hole you dug yourself into. But that just means, like the unpopped kernels in a bucket of popcorn, the really crazy ones all ended up at the bottom. And I'm no psychologist, but I knew paranoid schizophrenia when I saw it. Seriously, her story wasn't even that original. Lost her kids, became crazy, or the other way around. And now she blames everything on a fictional society of people living in abandoned subway tunnels. It's what you get when you mixed urban legends with actual trauma and simmered it all in mental illness. Could happen to the best of us, right? But Magda was persistent. Over the next week, she escaped 2 shelters. Each time the NYPD found her trying to pry open maintenance doors in the subway. Sick and tired of being called in the middle of the day to clean up her bullshit, I had the brilliant idea to go down the platform where she lived and do a field assessment. I had a feeling if I found an excuse to lose Magda near the Union Square station, she'd at least stop wasting my time. I told myself it's what she wanted, and the fact that it happens to work out for me was just a coincidence. So about 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, I took Magda on a field trip. The Union Square platform was uncharacteristically empty. I'd taken Magda near the end of the track and made sure nobody was watching us, just releasing a wild animal back into the wild. I thought to myself, this is what she wanted. She looked at me with clear eyes and genuine worry in her voice. "They are hungry tonight. Listen, I can't leave them to that." Maybe it's the way she said it, but something in her voice made my heart ache. Her boys were gone. I knew that. But what did it say about her as a mother that when the world had taken everything else away, that this is what she clung to? To everyone else, she was just human detritus. Not much different from the rats that scurried around in the dark. But once upon a time, she'd been a mother. Still is, in a way. She hopped off the platform and waddled off into the darkness, and I was alone. To this day, I can't tell you what changed my mind. Some people say empathy is like a muscle that you use or you lose, and I haven't had to use mine in a long, long time. But that night I must have had a cramp. "Magda, get back here." I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, jumped onto the tracks, and chased after her. "Magda, stop," I hissed. Each step took me further from the platform, and the sound of the station began to fade. Soon only the light that kept the darkness at bay was the cheap LED from my phone. It glowed dimly in the gloom, illuminating swirling dust motes that looked like thick, floating spores. Just a little further, she called back. What the hell am I doing? A breeze came down the tunnel, and the air changed. It was cooler, heavier. I take the subway twice a day. I've stared into the darkness ahead, waiting for the train to come as if that would make it come any faster. But for the first time, I felt the darkness staring back. Then I saw the bedding, piles of rags, mounds of refuse and rat droppings and empty cans. I shone my light on the trash, human food. You gotta be kidding me, I thought. You gotta be kidding me, said a voice from the darkness. I flinched back. My heart jumped into my throat and something grabbed my arm from behind. It was Magda. You see, Magda whispered, they've had nothing to eat since the coppers took me. Squatters, I said, though my voice trembled. It's just squatters, Magda. Dangerous ones. We need to leave. We need to leave, the voice said again. I froze. What did you say? Magda cackled and scurried away, and I chased after her. The voice wasn't hers. It was mine, and it felt like it was coming from inside my head. The acoustics, I muttered, trying to rationalize. It's just an echo. It is an echo, said the walls. Stop it. I snapped. Magda appeared behind me, and it made me jump. S-H-H-H-H, said Magda with a finger to her lips. She grabbed my wrist with her other hand and drew me to her. She whispered, we are close. To the squatters? I pulled my hand away. She leaned in close to me, and the beam of my flashlight caught her face. Her expression was blank and unamusing, like a light switch. Her face turned into a crazed, too wide smile with too many teeth. To my boys, she said, and opened her mouth to let out a cackle, and her mouth kept opening. The jaw unhinged with sound like snapping bones. I stumbled back in panic and dropped my phone. The light spun wildly, strobing against the tunnel walls, and in those flashes, I saw movement, figures hiding in the dark. I turned, scrambled to my feet, and ran. Run, my mind whispered. Run, Arthur. Hearing my name broke me. I ran blindly. The air stank of stale rotten meat, and took in big gulps as I half ran, half crawled in the dark. I had nothing to guide me but my fear. My feet splashed in the stagnant water between the tracks, and I heard the slap of wet skin on concrete from behind me. A wild cackle reverberated down the tunnel. Don't look back, I thought. Don't look back, the tunnel mocked. Look at us. Look at us. I looked back, and I saw Magda on the ceiling of the tunnel, crawling toward me like a spider. My foot caught on a railroad tie, and I went down hard. My knee cracked against the steel rail. I screamed, and my scream was swallowed by the darkness, then spat back at me by 1,000 voices. We're coming, Arthur. They were in my head. I wasn't hallucinating. I know what hallucinations are. These words came to me like I was remembering the lyrics to a song. I could hear and not hear. They were making me think the words. Their words. I scrambled on all fours, and I began to sob. My hand squelched into something soft and warm. I ignored it and crawled on hands and knees through the trash and muck. Ahead, a faint, sickly orange light, a maintenance hatch. I saw a rusted iron gate at the top of a crumbling staircase. It was chained, but there was light. I hit the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I could hear the slapping of wet flesh against cold tiles. I threw my shoulder against the gate. It groaned. Stay, Arthur, the voice's chorus. We're hungry. No. I shrieked, slamming my body against the iron again. I looked back again. Magda was at the bottom of the stairs. Crawling up the stairs, her neck twisted at a 90-degree angle. Arthur, she gargled. They're just hungry. Let my boys eat. She reached out and grabbed my ankle and pulled. My broken knee burned with white-hot pain. Her grip was wet and strong. Her arms looked too long and too pale. I kicked and it skimmed off the top of her head, but I felt her flesh come off. It was soft like it had rotted on her bones. She roared with anger and bit down on my ankle, and I screamed. I kicked again. This time my heel connected with her face. Her face caved in like it was made of wet clay, and she let go with a hiss. I threw myself at the gate one last time. The ancient chain snapped. I burst through, tumbling onto pavement. I rolled, scraping my skin raw on the asphalt, and curled into a ball, waiting for the teeth. But there was only the sound of traffic. I opened my eyes. I was on a side street in the Lower East Side. A yellow taxi honked at me. A group of hipsters smoking outside a bar stared. I was covered in black slime. My suit was torn. I was bleeding. "Help me?" I croaked. "Please help me." One of the hipsters flicked his cigarette, but near my head. "Jesus fucking bath salts Christ. Don't fucking touch me." They laughed and walked away. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. I had broken a knee and then ran on it for God knows how far. My ankle bled where Magda had dug in her teeth, the flesh torn and ragged like it was chewed by rocks. I dragged myself to a street light, desperate for the artificial glare. People stepped over me without even glancing down. That was 2 years ago. I never went back to my apartment. I don't know why. No one came looking for me either. I lost my job. I lost my savings. I lost my name. Now I stay in Queens. The subway runs above ground here. The N train rattles overhead on the elevated tracks, safe in the air. I never go into the city. Every time I walk over a subway grate and feel that warm, stale air blow up, I can smell that same stale, rotting smell. I don't sleep much. When I do, I hear my own thoughts echoing back to me, but in a voice that is and isn't mine. Last night, I found a new spot to sleep under the expressway. It was dry. It was quiet, but it wasn't safe. Nowhere is safe. I can still feel them in my mind. They've known since that night. They are always with me now. They get louder when I get close, and so I never cross the river. But there's a pull, like gravity. I can feel it. They whisper to me. They are waiting for me to come back, to wander too close to the dark. So next time you're alone on the platform and staring into the darkness, wondering when the train will come, stay far from the edge. You never know what might reach out and grab you. Story 10. My neighbor is more than just a cat lady. 5 months ago, I moved out of my parents' house after graduating from university. The offer I got for my current job came late, and because of that, I had little to no time to find somewhere to live. Everything was extremely out of my budget, and my starting salary couldn't accommodate anything but a small hole in the wall, exactly what I ended up getting. I never thought living alone would be so lonely. Like most people, I had a handful of eccentric roommates to get me through my studies, but a studio apartment can only accommodate so many things, 2 beds not being one of them. So every night when I came home from work, I would be greeted with the eerie stillness of a dark room and cold sheets. I would cook up a depressing meal consisting of whatever ingredients I had left. Most of the time it was spaghetti on my 5th day of working. I suppose news had spread to the small apartment complex that everyone had a new neighbor. Just as I closed my door and flipped on the light switch, a knock startled me out of my wits and caused me to drop my backpack on the floor, the contents spilling everywhere. I had turned around and seen through the peephole the one friendly face of a smiling older lady. Her hand was poised to rap again on the door when I opened it cautiously and greeted her. "Hello?" she had said quickly, though her eyes were closed, and she held a white cane with a tennis ball on the end in her withered hands. "My name is Barbara. I live next door." "Harper," I replied with a nervous chuckle. "You don't know how bad that scared me." I wasn't expecting a knock. "Are you having a hard time adjusting?" she inquired. You could say. Suddenly, she reached a hand to my face and touched my cheeks. "My, you're so thin. I bet you don't even have time to cook your own meals." The next night I received a cooked meal, and from then on, another almost every evening. If I came home late, it would be left on the doormat with a small, endearing sticker. Usually, the top would be wrapped in tin foil, which I would have to peel back to uncover what was within. Today it happened to be an oven-baked pizza. I smiled to myself heartily. I felt a little less alone that night while I turned on my laptop, and got to enjoy a bit more time relaxing than I usually did. However, That night, I woke up to an odd scratching on my wall. My bed was pushed right beside Barbara's apartment, and so I could sometimes faintly hear her TV or some kind of music that she listened to. That was the first time I heard some kind of meowing, too. Not just one mew, but a couple at once. Then an even fainter hushing, and they all went quiet. I thought nothing of it, being so late and having to wake up so early, so I ignored it many times. When I left my house the following Monday, I heard something akin to a wet slapping in Barbara's apartment. Pushing apart the worst thoughts, I rationalized that she was maybe pounding pork or making some kind of pastry, as older women do. I thought for the longest time that she lived alone, but sometime in the following week, I glimpsed into her apartment on the way into mine. I made eye contact with a small face in the corner of her house, which stared deeply. Barbara was on her way out and shut the door quickly, holding a large bag of garbage. "Do you live alone, Barbara?" I asked as I put the key into my lock. Barbara smiled and sighed while motioning to the trash she was hauling. "No," she said while she brought her cane before her, sweeping across the floor. "I have my son who visits quite often, but he's quite the useless lump when he does visit." I laughed and pushed my way into the studio. I let out a deep breath and tried to shake the image of those eyes out of my mind, but I couldn't. They were so empty and devoid of humanity. I made a note never to ask about Barbara's situation again. It was none of my business, anyway. That night I opened my door to a light rat-tat-tat at my door, which I knew would be Barbara. We talked briefly as she handed me another meal. However, she mentioned that her son had helped her bake this one. "That's nice," I had said. "I would bake if I had time." "He loves to bake. How about I get him to make you his signature focaccia? It's made with sardines. I just don't know why. But it adds such a savory taste that garlic and olives alone just won't give you." "Focaccia?" I paused. I thought focaccia was pretty advanced. "Not at all," she chuckled. "Not for him. He's quite skilled with his little hands." We bid goodbye for the night, and I closed the door. I revealed another dish. This time a lasagna with large chunks of meat, which looked to have been improperly ground. I cut myself a slice and assumed position in front of my laptop again. A few bites in, I felt something stringy in my mouth. It was getting caught on my tongue and between my teeth and gagged, dropping the plate onto my tiny table with a clang. I coughed viciously and stuck 3 fingers into my mouth and grabbed the string that had been causing me to choke. Surely it was a string from whatever meat product she had made. I had thought, a blind woman would have a hard time noticing something like that. I could no longer think when I pulled out a thick black clump of hair, which looked as though it had been pulled off of a hairbrush and placed within the lasagna. I vomited right then and there and felt shaken the rest of the night, while I cleaned my mess and threw out the food as quickly as I could. I saw many more pieces of hair within. For hours I could not shake the feeling of the hair and kept poking around in my mouth with my fingers as a phantom string kept appearing in my mouth. I fell asleep to the sounds of mewing once more, a cacophony of cats in the room next to me. Barbara did not appear to me for the next few days. I spotted a bag of cat food and some cans in front of her door one morning, which vanished when I came home in the evening. A couple more deliveries occurred before the woman appeared to me once more. This time, she was hauling a very oversized cat crate, which appeared to have a large cat within it. Despite my apprehension, I couldn't bear to watch such an old lady haul such heavy cargo, and I volunteered to help her at once. "You're very sweet," she said as I grabbed the crate from her. "If you could just get it past the stoop, I'd be so grateful." So I hauled it over her tiny stoop and into her apartment. I was staring down as I took care to not bump the crate, and when I finally looked into her apartment, I hardly kept my jaw from falling onto the floor. The first thing that hit me was the stench, a grotesque mix of kitty litter, and the odor of fecal matter and urine. 6 different cat boxes lined together, and a massive overcrowding of cat trees. "Just put him there." Barbara motioned to a corner where identical empty crates rested. The room remained in darkness as I put it down. The cat within brushed my leg with what I presumed was its paw, but when I looked down, I saw a very hairy finger caressing my ankle. I jumped away. My eyes widened to saucers when I finally met eyes with the thing in the cage. Those eyes from before boring into mine. "Mew," said the thing, a clearly human thing. It was completely nude and hairy from its cheeks to the tip of its finger, its nail being the only truly bare thing. It appeared to have extremely wet lips and a damp, pink nose to pair. Its abnormally long tongue rolled out of its mouth to reveal artificial spikes pierced into it as it licked the wire of the cage, the spikes getting stuck occasionally on the holes. The breath which radiated out of its mouth smelt like sewage and revealed teeth rotting from the tip to the root and covered with plaque. I looked back to Barbara, who obviously stared blankly at us. She had a ghostly smile on her lips. Rusty is quite old and so sweet. Barbara said a bit sadly as she placed a couple muffins that she had resting on her counter. That was Rusty I heard in the crate, wasn't it? I rushed to the door and flipped on the light switch. It flickered weakly to reveal many more cat things resting in the shadows. They were huge, and I immediately knew they were all humans on some sick joke. They were all naked, I was certain, but covered in hair either glued or grown themselves. They all had tails which moved in sync left and right, and a quiet hum, which I had not noticed before became apparent. They all stared at me with circular eyes that tried their best to mimic a feline's. Some of them quietly mewed when I rolled my eyes over the ones I would dare to look at. Do you like cats? Barbara asked. I'm more of a dog person myself. I swallowed. That's a shame. I'm a cat lady. When my husband passed away, I found I needed something to occupy myself with, especially when the first cat turned up at my door. I found they all came one by one. Now, I think I have about 9 or so by the sound of it. They eat so darn much, I can barely keep up with their appetites. A weird silence befell us as I nodded, and she obviously expected a response. I could only stare as one of the cats walked on all fours to the nearest bowl and ate the kibble, within then made to slurp up an open can of wet food beside it. It quenched itself with water from an automatic dispenser, revealing identical spikes to the cat in the crate. I'm sure you're tired, Barbara resumed. Take these muffins. Thank you for helping me, darling. No problem. I managed as I took the muffins and retreated into the safety of my own apartment, only now noticing how many different voices really mewed from the apartment next door. I heard Barbara hushing them sweetly long after I left. My mother didn't believe me when I reached out the next day for advice. She was convinced I didn't know what breed the cats really were, that I was ungrateful for everything the woman was doing for me, being judgmental as everyone in my generation usually was. You always take people at face value, and you don't care to learn anything about them. She had hollered. Have you ever considered the stress is really just getting to you? Upon her suggestion, I thought maybe everything I had seen had been because of the low light and the stress I had been experiencing from working such long hours without nourishing my body. Maybe I'd hallucinated. The light in her apartment was so faint anyways. I couldn't be sure of anything. However, I was sure I didn't want to receive any more food from Barbara. After a night of certain scratching on the walls next to me, I decided I'd write her a note, give her some change, and leave it at that so I never felt obligated to repay her. Thank you for your kindness with helping me settle in. I remember the note I read. I hope this is enough to cover the expenses of ingredients, and a bit more to help with your cats. I took a deep breath as I left my apartment very late that night to ensure she was asleep, and I wouldn't be confronted. I slid the note in a small envelope under the door of Barbara's apartment and turned until the sound of vigorous scratching on the door caught my attention. Then a very loud yowling from the other side. Sure. I tried to hush it as quickly as I could not awake Barbara, but it just would not stop. Out of curiosity and desperation, I turned the knob of the door to let the cat out. What turned to face me was a grown man just as tall as I, with none of the cat-like features of the other things within the apartment. He acted like one of the things as he went on all fours and skittered out of the apartment and into the hallway. He was naked as well, and I averted my eyes as he flashed me all the way down towards the entrance. I slammed the door shut and rushed back into my room. Now I'm back on my laptop. I have work in 2 hours, and I really should be leaving, but I don't think I want to after I've just released something into my apartment complex. I've rationalized everything up to this point, but I just can't understand a colony of cat people being housed by a seemingly unaware, blind old woman. The hair, their nudeness, munching on the cat food she provided with what I knew to be a meager pension since she lived in a place like this.